Hey, it's Chris. And AJ. And this is Chris and AJ in the morning, bringing you the news, weather, traffic, and more. Today is July 24th, and it is 98 degrees outside. Today is a very special day on AJ and Chris in the morning, because it is the birthday of our first interviewee, Amelia Earhart. In honor of this amazing aviator, we will be playing for you this interview, and hopefully you get to learn a little bit more about her.
Hello, it's Anthony and Christopher bringing you the news. With us today is Amelia Earhart. You all know who she is, but today we are going to get a little bit more dirt on her. So Amelia, tell us a little bit about yourself as a child.
Well, let's see. I was born on July 24th, 1897 in Kansas. I lived with my parents, Edwin and Amy, but my poor grandmother had so many deaths happen in her life that they sent me and my newly born sister Muriel to live with her in Atchison, Kansas, when I was 3, which I loved. My grandmother was my main provider because my grandfather was mentally unstable at the time, but I did get to visit my parents in the summer. I loved my childhood life.
When did you first decide you wanted to be a pilot?
It's a funny story, actually. When I was 10 and saw my first plane, I was completely uninterested. It was not until later in my life, while watching a stunt flying exhibition, where I became remotely interested in flying. But the moment that changed my life was the moment pilot Frank Hawks gave me my first ride on December 28th, 1920, and I realized that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
Amazing. Truly amazing. So how did you reach that goal?
Well, of course, I had to take flying lessons, which I took in 1921, I believe. I still remember my instructor, Netta Snook, and naturally, I needed a plane, which I also bought in 1921. It was a yellow prototype Kinner plane, and I named it the Canary. Isn't that a great name?
Indeed. Were you educated in fields other than piloting?
Yes, I went to private school as a child and a college preparatory school, after which I decided to train to be a nurse's aide in World War I. I also went to Columbia University to study pre-med, but I left after 2 years to join my recently reunited family. My mother had left my father when I was younger, but they got back together in the end. After that, I began my flying lessons.
So Amelia, what is your drive? What keeps you going?
My drive is women's rights. I strongly believe that women are equal to men and are capable of anything men are capable of. As a child, I was always playing unconventional games that got me the label tomboy. I even used to hunt rats with my own pistol. The bottom line is my goal is to prove women and men are equals. My husband and I believe this, and we're both equals.
Your husband, who is he?
My husband's name is George Putnam. He's a publicist and publisher. It is an interesting story, actually. I met him for the first time at my interview for my first real job. I was asked to be the first woman to fly over the Atlantic with Bill Stoltz and Slim Gordon.
How was that experience of flying over the Atlantic?
It was an exhilarating experience. I just love flying. We left from Trepassey Harbor, Newfoundland, and arrived at Buryport, Wales. It took us about 21 hours. I can still remember the day exactly, June 17th, 1928.
So this is when your piloting career really kicked off?
Yes, it is. After this life-changing experience, everything I did was centered around flying. It was my passion and my dream. I competed and placed at women's flying derbies and expanded my horizons.
That's just swell. So what was your next big flight?
May 20th, 1932. The day I attempted to be the second person to fly solo across the Atlantic. Once again, I flew from Newfoundland, but this time from Harbor Grace to Paris. Although I experienced some rough weather conditions, I was able to safely land in Ireland. Sorry to all those cows I disturbed in the pasture I landed in, and thank you to my husband for helping me to plan the whole trip. Lindbergh better watch out. Women can be just as successful as men.
Of course. So what other flights have you completed?
Well, there was a time I became the first person to fly across the Pacific and the first person to fly from Mexico City to Newark, Ohio. And I was also the first person to fly from Los Angeles to Mexico City.
Oh, wow. Can you give us any specifics?
Sure. I flew across the Pacific from Honolulu to Oakland, California on January 11th, 1935. I flew from Mexico City to Newark on May 8th, 1935, which took about 13 hours. and from Los Angeles to Mexico City on April 19th to the 10th, 1935, which took about 14 hours.
You have many achievements. Have you won any awards?
I have. An important one to me was the Distinguished Flying Cross, awarded to me by Congress because I was the first woman to receive this great honor. I also set speed records with and without loads and also altitude records, and have other awards under my belt.
At 8:45 a.m. on July 2nd, 1937, Amelia Earhart sent out her final message. She was attempting to be the first person in history to fly around the entire world. She felt she needed to get one more final flight out of her system before going into long and well-earned retirement at around the age of 40. The flight called for Earhart and her neighbor and navigator, Fred Noonan, to travel 29,000 miles. They took off on July 1st, 1937, and although they never reached their goal, they did become the first people to fly from the Red Sea to India. Unfortunately, their attempt to complete the last 7,000 miles was their fatal decision. Due to faulty weather reports, the pair took off from Lae, New Guinea, July 2nd, hoping to reach their most difficult goal yet, Howland Island. Unfortunately, the weather was not clear as predicted, and Earhart radioed in several times, reporting cloudy weather and a constant lowering of fuel. But the radio connection was failing, making her unable to hear the responses to her messages. Her last radio message was, "We are running north and south." The recovery effort ceased on July 19th, 1937, but no traces of her were ever found, and a lighthouse at Howland Island was erected in her memory. Amelia Earhart was a legend and will always be remembered in history as a woman equal to men.